All right, my name is Glen Smith. I go to Johns Hopkins University. I study computer science. I am currently a senior, next step grad school, hopefully. Yeah.
All right. What social justice issues, if any, are you passionate about?
So, the social justice issues, I would say that I'm definitely a proponent of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think for me, it sort of began after I sort of studied abroad. So I studied abroad in London last spring, and during that time, I sort of was able to gain a different perspective of sort of my identity and what it means to really be Black in America by sort of being Black in the UK. And by having that experience, it sort of like showed me another side. So when I came back, I definitely got much more interested in sort of like, around that time, the Black Lives Matter movement was at one of its peaks. So I sort of started getting involved with like reading up on it and becoming more knowledgeable in that subject. It started before that, but I really hadn't had any exposure, like too much to it, until after I had come back, and then I felt like it was something I wanted to be a part of.
Have you ever gone to a protest about the Black Lives Matter movement?
I have not been to a protest. Just mostly because of like obligations that I've had that I wasn't able to attend one. But I do feel like actually attending one is something that I do want to do. And it's definitely on my bucket list.
What have you thought about, like, seeing protests on campus or around Baltimore especially? What have you thought about those BLM protests?
I definitely feel like those protests are the kind of protests that that will probably incite the most change. So the protest that we had on campus, it was a silent protest. It wasn't sort of like a rowdy riot kind of thing, and not to discredit riots or discredit the reason behind the riot, especially, and discredit the feelings that people feel to make them want to riot. But sort of being able to stay clear-headed, level-headed, and being able to have sort of this like organized grouping of people that share the same ideals, sort of come together and fight for this one cause. And not just actually this one cause, but like multiple causes. So Black Lives Matter is definitely like intersectional. It's not just only about saving Black lives. So I definitely think like the organization that goes behind the ones that we've had on campus, the ones we've had in the city, the ones we've had across the country, are definitely coming together very coherently, and I think it's showing not only in the United States but across the world too.
You talked about educating yourself. Would you consider yourself an activist in any form?
I would definitely consider myself an activist. However, I would not say that I'm an activist to the level of where I'd like to be. So like I said, I haven't actually been to a protest, but it's something I want to do. I'm sort of an activist in that I disseminate information, but I also like to fact check it first. Fact check it. So not just see something and send it off so everyone can see, but sort of like look a bit into it and then send it off so that people are getting proper information. So I sort of see myself as that middleman, that person that sort of like isn't on the forefront, but is still helping to get the information from the fringe to the rest of the population that doesn't have the opportunity to participate in these protests or doesn't have the opportunity to sort of really be the activists that they want to be as well.
When you say send it off, do you do that using specific platforms?
Yes. So usually I would use social media. So So of course things like Facebook, they could be pictures, such as pictures on Instagram or Tumblr, or Tumblr posts or anything like that. And also like being like a student leader on campus, like being able to have that position where I can talk to many different people and sort of share it in that way. I think attacking on both fronts, by social media and like in person, having the interpersonal relationships are really beneficial as well.
Could you talk a little bit more about the capacity in which you're a student leader?
Yes. So I am sort of a student leader in a few different ways. So the first of all is residential advisor. So here at Johns Hopkins, I'm a residential advisor for sophomores. So that's sort of one of the ways in which, I'm in this sort of, for lack of a better word, authoritative figure, but really leadership position that can sort of, touch all these different cornerstones of, the population, especially my population, but also in the building as well, and the sophomore community. I'm involved generally in community living, so things like housing, conference services where we have people come during the summer, and we have scheduled events throughout the year, so it's sort of that as well. And I have been a TA in my major, so computer science. So that's sort of like another way in which I'm in this role that allows me to sort of actually disseminate that information.
Do you think you are in a position where your voice is heard?
I definitely feel like from the student leader position, I am in a place where my voice is heard amongst students. However, I do not feel that I am in a position, to reach higher up, such as administration of the university, such as even higher than that, local governments, federal governments. I feel like your influence, I definitely feel like your influence is, based on your stature, it's based on your position or your class, economic standing, all those kinds of things. So I feel like if I were to have those things, I would have higher influence. But until then, I can sort of only reach, a very limited space from where I stand.
Can you think of a specific moment where you tried to make your voice heard to the higher ups and it didn't happen?
Definitely. So it was my freshman year here at Johns Hopkins. I was at an event for the Office of Multicultural Affairs. It was sort of a dinner between, current students that were Baltimore Scholars. So Baltimore Scholar is a student that comes from Baltimore, accepted to the university, and they do receive a scholarship. So current Baltimore Scholars and new Baltimore Scholars were in this dinner with upper administration, which included the president of the university and which included deans and vice provosts and all those kind of administration heads. So I was tasked to speak first, and the task that I was, what I was supposed to talk about was sort of the learning gap, before coming into college, and then once you get here, the reason why covered grades is useful for me, and the reason why, some people come not prepared as others, and why preparatory programs should be in place for that. And by the president himself, I was actually sort of invalidated. I shared my experience coming from the Baltimore School for the Arts, where half of my curriculum was music performance and half of it was academics. So I didn't have that rigorous academic background like with AP courses. I had only taken 2 compared to my colleagues, which might take 6 to 8. He sort of invalidate it as my own personal experience, and he says it doesn't really represent, the population at Hopkins that comes in as freshmen. And I do recognize that my situation is unique from my background. However, my situation is not unique in the fact that people do come in and they struggle because they don't have the same academic background as some of their peers. Yet the school does see potential in them, but seeing potential and letting them in isn't enough. You have to really support them in their first year and pretty much throughout their entire college career. So that was sort of a moment in which I saw that my influence was sort of limited to a certain sphere, and it doesn't really reach as high as I'd like it to. I'd wish that my concerns were taken into consideration a bit more.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.